Wesley was 22 years old, living in a small, slightly run-down apartment in the city, but it was his space. He was a quiet guy, focused on his studies in web development, dreaming of creating something big one day. He spent his evenings coding on his old laptop, the hum of the city his constant soundtrack. His apartment was on the third floor of a brick building that had seen better days, but it had character. He had made it cozy, with string lights and shelves filled with books and thrift store finds. He did not have much money working part-time at a local coffee shop, but he was good at managing what he had, always putting a little aside. His landlords, Mr. and Mrs. Albright, lived on the ground floor. They seemed like a perfectly ordinary couple, a bit stiff, always quick to collect the rent but rarely seen otherwise. Wesley tried to be a good tenant, always paid on time, never caused trouble. He liked his independence, the feeling of making his own way in the world. He felt like he was slowly building something for himself, brick by brick. One sweltering afternoon, a shrill, terrifying scream ripped through the usual city noise. Wesley had just returned home from his shift, sweat trickling down his back, when he heard it. It was coming from the Albrights' apartment. A thick plume of smoke, acrid and black, began to pour from their windows. Panic surged through him, but his instincts took over. He remembered seeing their young daughter, Emily, playing near the window earlier that day. Without a second thought, he ran towards their door, kicking it open when he found it locked. The living room was already engulfed in flames, the heat suffocating. Through the smoke, he saw Emily, no older than 5, trapped behind a fallen bookshelf, crying uncontrollably. The fire was spreading fast, licking at the furniture. He did not hesitate. He plunged into the smoke, the heat searing his skin, ignoring the growing roar of the fire. He lifted the heavy bookshelf, his muscles straining, and pulled the terrified child into his arms. He carried her out, coughing and gasping for air, collapsing on the sidewalk just as the first fire truck arrived. Mrs. Albright, tear-streaked and hysterical, rushed to hug her daughter. Mr. Albright, pale and shaken, clapped Wesley on the back, stammering his thanks. They called him a hero, promised him anything, said they were forever in his debt. Wesley just wanted to catch his breath and forget the smell of burning plastic. He felt a quiet pride, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. A week later, still recovering from minor smoke inhalation and a few burns, Wesley received a certified letter. He opened it, expecting a thank you card or maybe a gift basket. Instead, it was a rent increase notice. His rent, already a significant chunk of his income, was being raised by 50%. 50%. The letter stated it was due to increased property values and necessary building improvements. He marched downstairs, the letter crumpled in his hand. Mr. Albright met him at the door, his face impassive. When Wesley brought up the heroic act, the man simply shrugged. "Business is business, Wesley," he had said, without a hint of shame. "The market dictates prices. Besides, you are a capable young man, I am sure you will manage." Mrs. Albright just stood behind him, avoiding Wesley's gaze. The gratitude, the promises, had vanished like smoke. Wesley felt a cold anger settle in his stomach. His home, his sanctuary, was being threatened by the very people whose child he had saved. He had a huge problem. He was being squeezed out, financially and emotionally. The Albrights had become his nemesis. Wesley tried to fight it. He spent hours researching tenant rights online, poring over legal documents until his eyes burned. He called every legal aid clinic he could find, but the answers were always the same. If the notice was given correctly, and there were not specific rent control laws, the landlord usually had the right to raise the rent. He tried to reason with the Albrights again, but they simply ignored his calls and letters. He even tried to rally the other tenants, hoping a group effort could sway them, but most were scared, unwilling to risk their own housing. They either sympathized quietly or avoided him. He felt isolated and powerless. The deadline for the new rent loomed over him like a dark cloud. He started working double shifts at the coffee shop, often closing at midnight and opening at 5 in the morning. He sacrificed his study time, falling behind on his web development courses. He ate instant noodles for every meal, foregoing even small treats. He scoured online listings for cheaper apartments, but everything he found was either too far from his job and school, too small, or frankly unsafe. Each apartment viewing was a fresh wave of disappointment. He felt a desperate urgency, a constant knot in his chest. His savings, which he had so carefully built up for future plans, were rapidly dwindling just to meet his current expenses, let alone a 50% rent hike. Then came the final blow. One morning, he received an eviction notice taped to his door with aggressive force. It stated he had 30 days to vacate the premises if the new rent was not paid. 30 days. It was just a formality, a legal threat, but it felt like a punch to the gut. He had nowhere to go. His parents lived in another state, and while they would help if he truly begged, he hated the thought of going home in defeat, having failed to make it on his own. He could not impose on his friends, who were all struggling college students themselves. He looked around his small apartment, the space he had painstakingly made his own, and felt a profound sense of loss, a gnawing emptiness. All his hard work, all his good intentions, had led him to this. He was being cast out, treated as disposable, all because of two greedy people. The memory of Emily's terrified face in the fire and his own brave actions now tasted bitter. He had saved a child, and in return he was losing everything. He felt utterly broken, unsure of what to do, staring at the packing boxes he would soon need. All may truly be lost, but as Wesley stared at that eviction notice, a strange resolve began to harden inside him. He remembered the feeling of that fallen bookshelf, the surge of strength he found to lift it. He was not helpless. He might be down, but he was not out. He thought about his web development skills, the side projects he had always been passionate about but never had time to truly develop. One particular idea, a platform for independent game developers to showcase their early prototypes and get feedback, had always nagged at him. He had been slowly building it in his spare time, more as a hobby than a serious venture. Now, facing destitution, he decided to pour every last bit of his energy, every last waking moment, into it. He stopped looking for apartments, he stopped arguing with the Albrights, he simply focused. He coded day and night, powered by instant coffee and a burning desire for justice. Sleep became a luxury he could not afford. He launched the platform with barely any fanfare, a simple online post to a developer forum. To his astonishment, it took off. It was not an overnight success, but the idea resonated. Developers loved the community aspect, the low barrier to entry. Gamers loved the chance to discover new talent early. It started slow, then gained momentum. A small investment group, seeing its potential, reached out, then a larger one. Within months, what started as a desperate last-ditch effort had become a thriving startup. Wesley found himself with more money than he had ever dreamed of, more than enough to escape his predicament. But escaping was not enough anymore. He wanted justice. He discreetly hired a real estate agent. He knew the Albrights' building was old, and he had overheard them grumbling about upkeep and property taxes. He found out they had been quietly trying to sell the entire building for over a year, but could not find a buyer willing to meet their price. They were struggling more than they let on. This was his chance. He moved quickly, working through lawyers and shell corporations to keep his identity secret. The purchase went through without a hitch, the entire transaction taking place under the radar. The day the paperwork was finalized, the day the building officially became his, Wesley felt a powerful, quiet satisfaction. He then had his lawyers draft an eviction notice for the Albrights. 2 weeks later, on a cool autumn morning, Wesley walked up to the Albrights' ground-floor apartment. The same door he had kicked open to save their daughter, the same door behind which Mr. Albright had dismissed his heroism. He knocked firmly. Mr. Albright opened it, a look of annoyance on his face, ready to complain about something. Wesley held up the official document, his face unreadable. "Good morning, Mr. Albright," he said, his voice steady. "I am here to serve you with an eviction notice." Mr. Albright's eyes narrowed, ready to argue, until he saw Wesley's name printed clearly at the bottom of the new building ownership papers attached to the notice. His face went pale, his jaw dropping open. Mrs. Albright appeared behind him, looking confused, then horrified as she saw the documents. The color drained from her face. Wesley gave them exactly 30 days, just as they had given him, no more, no less. He even offered to let them stay the full 30 days, a courtesy they had extended to him, but his words carried no warmth, only a precise, legal finality. Wesley watched them pack their belongings over the next few weeks, the Albrights looking smaller, older, defeated. He moved back into his old apartment, though now it felt different, no longer just a rental, but a symbol of his hard-won victory. He refurbished the building, installing modern amenities and fixing the long-neglected repairs. He lowered the rent for the remaining tenants, making it fair and affordable, and they were relieved and grateful. He found new meaning in his work, not just for financial gain, but for empowering others and ensuring fairness. He had learned that true strength was not just in saving someone, but in standing up for himself, in turning betrayal into power. He also learned that sometimes, the best way to mend a broken world was to remake it yourself. As the Albrights finally drove away in a beat-up moving truck, their faces etched with bitterness, Wesley saw Emily, now a little older, peering out the back window. Their eyes met for a brief moment. She did not seem to recognize him, but a flicker of a memory, perhaps of a blurry face in smoke, crossed her young features. It was a silent, poetic end to a chapter, a reminder that even good deeds, when met with greed, could ignite a fire of a different kind. He looked at his building, his home, his triumph, and knew he had rebuilt more than just property. He had rebuilt his own future, brick by purposeful brick.